Hey, babes, and welcome to the BJJ Babes podcast, episode 6. I'm your host, Laura. This podcast, I started it as a passion project for me that was born out of my love of Jiu Jitsu. And I just want to take a moment this week and just acknowledge how much fun I've had meeting new people and learning from them. I mean, every time I record with a guest, it's so much fun, and I just feel like I'm talking for 45 minutes to an hour with a new friend about how much we love jiu-jitsu. I also feel like it's refining my views of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and helping me get some clarity in terms of where I am and where the sport fits into my life. So I hope you all are getting similar benefits out of listening to these episodes. This week's guest found me on Reddit. Her name is Shelby Norment. We both love Reddit. I read the BJJ page and the BJJ women page. I read other pages too on different topics. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Reddit is pretty hilarious. Maybe at some point I'll do a best of BJJ Reddit episode where we just read some of the ridiculous posts. So if you want to co-host an episode of that with me, reach out. Let me know. So Shelby found me on Reddit. She reached out. She's a brown belt currently living in Florida. And she reached out because she wanted to talk about safety in jiu-jitsu. Because she'll tell you that she had a neck injury back when she was a blue belt that led to her having major neurosurgery and a spinal fusion. Just a reminder, we're also desensitized. We're also used to just choking the shit out of each other. This is a dangerous sport. You can get really hurt, honestly, doing the interview and then also listening to it back. It was a really good reminder to me because I have not had an injury like Shelby's, but I've had minor injuries, a snapped tendon in my pinky, a broken toe, a split lip, where I kept training. And I'll make jokes like, well, it's not broken if you didn't get it x-rayed. And it's good to remember, if you want to stay in this sport long term, it's okay to go to the doctor. It's okay to listen to your body, and it's okay to rest, because maybe having to take time off in the short term means that you can keep training in the long term. It's just a good reminder, and Shelby's story is definitely one worth listening to. So I hope you enjoy. Here is Shelby Norment. All right. Hi, everyone. We're here with Shelby. Hi, Shelby.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm pretty good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Thank you for joining us. This is Tucker. He's apparently joining us today, too.
Nice.
Yeah. So Shelby, could you introduce yourself, give quick story of who you are and, where you are in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah. So I did most of my training in Michigan. I was born and raised in Michigan, spent the first almost 30 years of my life there. So I started off training in Detroit at a Marcelo Garcia affiliate. Um, Trained there through my blue belt. I was a white and a blue belt for quite a while. Then I moved to Arizona. In Arizona, I was still training jujitsu, and I actually got promoted to purple belt by my school in Detroit. Actually, it was kind of weird. I went back to do like an exhibition no-gi match, and they promoted me there at my old school because by the time they promoted me to purple belt, I had joined an MMA fight team, and I was trying to fight MMA, so I did a switch from jiu-jitsu to MMA, but I still had been a blue belt for like almost 5 years. So they're like, we need to promote this girl. Unfortunately, had a major neck surgery from jiu-jitsu in 2022. And by that time, I had moved to Texas and I was still a purple belt. It took me about a year to get back on the mats training. And I trained up until about December, January of last year. Got promoted to brown belt almost a year ago when I moved to Florida, but it was actually a couple months after I got promoted that I realized that my neck is it's just not good enough to train. So I don't know if I'm gonna continue. I have, a lot of like mixed feelings, and I have to see how my neck holds up and kind of balance the risk versus reward of getting my black belt. So that's where I am.
Yeah, that's a tough consideration, and I can only imagine the different factors that might go into that.
Yeah, yeah.
You
So
mentioned that you started training in Michigan. When was that, and what made you start training?
that was 2013. I was actually a triathlete for like 5 or 6 years before that. I did long distance triathlons. And in 2012, I raced Ironman Arizona, which is like the really long one. It's 140.6 miles. So I did that, and then I was like, wow, I really love triathlon. This would be cool if I could make it like a career. So I actually went to officer candidate school in the Marine Corps in 2013, and I did that only because I wanted to join their triathlon team, which we had like a packet, and I was going to get through training and then go, be a Marine Corps officer and race for the
Hmm.
Marine Corps, but that did not happen because I got injured. I ended up actually having shoulder surgery and I broke my foot. So while I was recovering from shoulder surgery, because that was a big one, it took me about 6 months to recover. I was just like sitting on my couch and I was in this city where I didn't really know anybody. I was just working, and this is like going to age me. I saw Ronda Rousey in UFC, and I was like, this is really cool, like what she's doing on the ground. Like, I had always liked fighting because my dad was a boxer for a long time growing up, and I was always in like a boxing gym, although I should have taken boxing more seriously for my dad. I did not, but I was always kind of exposed to combat sports. And
Hmm.
when I saw what she was doing on the ground, I was like, this is really cool. And I didn't know it was judo at the time. I actually thought it was jujitsu. So I just Googled like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu near me. And
Hmm.
luckily, there was a gym like super close to my house. And I waited. I actually went and tried jujitsu a little prematurely after my shoulder surgery. um, yeah, because I was just like so honestly depressed, like to be
Yeah.
sitting there and having been so athletic and so active to like sitting in a sling on my couch, just watching TV all the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I started and I loved it after my first class. I was like, this is really, really awesome. So, yeah.
Yeah. What was your first class like?
I will never forget. It was terrifying, first of all, because the gym that I went to, there were like very few women, especially in Michigan. Michigan, they're really now caught up, I think. They're catching up. They're not like obviously California level, but um, they're getting a lot better. But back when I started, there was like nobody who was a female training, maybe like two or three women in the whole state. Um, but I learned the knee cut pass, and I'll never forget that. It was gi, and that's my favorite pass, and I love it. And yeah, it was a really cool first lesson. So it was awesome.
Yeah, the knee cut is my favorite too. So I
Nice.
I didn't learn it anyway, but once I learned it now, I actually have to be like, don't only knee cut because you're going to be very predictable.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great pass.
Yeah, it is. Were you primarily in the gi or no gi when you started?
Gi.
Gi.
Yeah, I was, well, the first probably almost year I was primarily in gi. And then I started to switch to no gi because like the Marcelo Garcia curriculum, and
Hmm.
I didn't know this until I took my gi off, favors no gi and gi equally.
Okay.
So they don't teach you a lot of like spider guard and like lasso. They teach you a game that's pretty much completely transferable.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I never, because like Marcelo, he's like almost an equal world champ in gi and no gi, so his curriculum is just like, I mean, he does some gi dependent stuff, but really, like, I had no idea. I just took my gi off and I was like, oh, it's pretty much the same for me. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I did. The first year was just gi, and then I pretty much like the rest of my jujitsu life was in gi and no gi pretty much equally.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to get your blue belt?
I think I was a white belt for almost 2 years.
Hmm.
And I think I was a blue belt for almost 4.5 years.
Mhm.
Um, but I did move states. I moved
Yeah.
from Michigan to Arizona, and then in Arizona, I did a couple gym switches because I was trying to fight. I realized I wanted to fight MMA.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, and I was competing a lot when I was a blue belt. So they
Yeah.
were kind of trying to like make sure I matured in my blue belt before moving on to purple.
Yeah. No, it took me 2 years to get my blue belt. I just got it. And I think it's interesting, yeah, when you change gyms and people put a lot on themselves in terms of their progress. But at the same time, everybody's progress is individual. And the belts are just a outward manifestation of our progress. So what difference did you see in terms of your jujitsu practice from white belt onward through the belts?
Um, Gosh, I think that like white belt was just a immersion phase. You're
Yeah.
just like you have all this information thrown at you and you have to learn how to learn.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know, like I've always been trying to learn a different language my whole life. And
Yeah.
it has not, I'm just trying to buckle down like a lot lately with Spanish. So I kind of feel like it's like that. Like I have to learn how to learn this language. So I'm very much a white belt right now in learning this language.
Hmm.
Um, so I have to like, at white belt, you're like, what works best for me? Like for me, I'm easily overwhelmed and I'm an overthinker. So I had to
Hmm.
like observe like who is like me mentally and how do they take in information and kind of like um I don't know, pick their brains a little bit and then kind of model my learning after them.
Hmm.
Um and then blue belt, when I first got promoted, I got beat up in tournaments. I got like mauled. I mean, it was like it's a big jump, especially when you're competing and you go to the next belt level. You're like, holy crap, like this is really it's a wake up call.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, in blue belt, as you can have a brand new blue belt who's only been training for maybe a year,
Hmm.
and they get promoted, and then you can have a blue belt who's basically like a purple belt, but they're just here, or like those world champion kids who are basically like baby black belts, like the AOJ kids and everything.
Oh my God. I'm so glad that I started training like already in the Masters division so I never have to fight those kids.
They are crazy. And like we actually had one in Detroit, Jacob, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Kasama, I think it is, but he was one of those kids. Like he went to AOJ and then he went to oh my gosh, that school where Fion trains. JC
Essential
Torres, right?
in New York, right? Essential.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
he went there too. So he's like that kid. And
Yeah.
I remember like he would give us seminars as a blue belt and we had like black belts coming there. So it's just like blue belt is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
you never know what you're gonna get. Like it's a very huge learning curve. So like you have to be very patient with yourself and just humble and
Yeah.
like figure out what do you want to do? Like, do you want to learn a guard or do you want to learn, passing or like kind of what do you want to do?
Hmm.
Um, and then purple belt, oh my gosh, purple belt's so hard. Like when I competed only once in the adult division at purple belt and I got whooped. It's like this is not fun. Um, no, I competed a couple times at purple belt. Actually, I lied, but the IBJJF tournament I did, I was considered a masters, but I always like to try to like do adult because I was kind of on the brink.
Yeah.
Um, but I was also like primarily training MMA at the time, so I wasn't to compete jujitsu. I feel like you have to train jujitsu. It's
Yeah.
like kind of like triathlon too. Like if you think that if you like say I was a strong cyclist in triathlon and I thought, oh, I'm gonna go do a time trial with other cyclists, and no, I got beat bad. So you
Yeah.
can't be like a generalist.
Yeah.
Because the people are really good at purple belt, but purple belt was more like you find a game and you improve upon it.
Hmm.
Um, and I noticed people started to look to me for a lot of advice. So you kind of like make that shift into like, oh, people are relying on me now, so I have to really know my technique.
Yeah.
Because now I'm teaching it to other people, and Um, I mean, brown belt, I honestly like, I don't know. It's like, it's weird. I haven't really, I mean, I trained a little bit at brown belt. I haven't competed at brown belt. I
Hmm.
don't know if I will. Masters definitely, obviously. But
Yeah.
I'd like to feel the difference, in belt levels. Um, I don't know, brown belt, I feel like I finally earned some type of respect because people are like, oh, well, she's made it this far, she must know something. And then you definitely
Yeah.
become a teacher at that point, but not the teacher. So, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And black belt, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see, maybe we won't, I don't know.
It's interesting to talk about, how the different belts felt, because even looking back at being a white belt and then getting to the skill level, the blue belt skill level, I try to say things to white belts that I wish someone had said to me, because there are moments, you're right, there's so much information, and I've heard it described as drinking from a fire hose, and you don't even know how to organize it. And I finally feel like I can start to organize the information. And there's still a lot, but at least now there's like a base understanding. And
Yeah.
yeah, so for me, it's like I just want to say to the white belts, yeah, it's a lot. And that's normal, and that's okay, and just stick with it. It's gonna feel like a lot for a long time.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like the most frustrating thing to hear is people telling you like it's just how it is, but really it's just how it is. And you have to be patient and humble enough to accept the fact that you're gonna suck and not know anything. Because I think that one of the biggest differences I saw with training jujitsu and training MMA is like there's a lot more cerebral people that come to jujitsu because it is so complicated and it's not like the brute like force and violence that MMA is.
Yeah,
And not saying anything bad because there's some really smart people who train MMA, but
yeah.
MMA you can get away with a lot of athleticism, and
Mm,
jujitsu sometimes you can't.
mm.
So yeah, you really have to know your techniques and know them well, and it takes a lot of time to master that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm finally understanding. In jujitsu, a smaller opponent can beat, especially an untrained opponent who's larger than them or who has less training than them. And I'm finally starting to notice the details on the techniques that make it possible. And before it was like, oh, you do this move and you move this person, you move their hip and you get out from under them. I would be under this person. They're not moving. They're not moving. Why aren't they moving? And now
Yeah.
it's, oh, if I put my knees here and work this lever, that's what makes the size difference matter less. And
Yeah.
it takes time.
Exactly.
And you think, like, you go in and you're like, if I just do this technique the way my professor teaches it, and it's just not the case. Did you start competing right away at white belt? When did you start?
Yeah, I did. You know what? I only did one tournament at white belt, and it was funny because, like, I mean, I started jujitsu, I don't know, I was like 26, 27. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
26, I think. No, 25, 26. Sorry. Yeah, I was like, I can't remember if I was 25 or 26. Um, but people were like, oh, well, like you have a good like sense of athleticism, like you are like a competitive person, like why don't you go compete? And I kind of had to go compete to get my blue belt, because
Uh,
my instructor at the time was like very hard on me, but it was because I think he could see that like I was talented. Um, and I mean, it's like whatever, a lot of people are talented in jujitsu, but it was just like, I was still young and I was training a lot and I had a passion for it too. So he could see
yeah.
that I was very passionate and I was serious about it. So I actually did, and I love this tournament. This is still my favorite tournament ever. I did IBJJF, what is it called? It's in New York. It's in College Park. Um, I think it's called IBJJF New York, maybe. I can't remember the name of it, but I had 3 matches that day, and I wasn't really nervous. I was just kind of like observing, like, just taking in all the information. Like, this is where you go to the bullpen. You got to get your gi measured. You got to make weight. Making weight was something new for me, so I had to like make sure, and that became a huge problem later for me, honestly. But especially as I got older and you know weight cutting and hormone changes, and it became like brutal.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because I was always a light feather. And when
Mhm.
I first started jujitsu, I was like, I could have been a rooster if I would have just cut a little bit more. And then I was a light feather. Then I was a feather who cut to light feather. It's just like, I feel like sometimes when you cut weight, you just keep going up and you're like, oh God.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had 3 matches that day, and I think I finished the first one by submission. I won the second one by points, and I lost finals by points. So I was sad, but I was happy because the girl I lost to in finals was really good, and
Yeah.
it was a good experience to lose because, I always did triathlon, which is not such a spectator sport. It is an individual sport, but it's not a spectator sport. Like, you don't have people sitting in stands. You're just like, you have people see you cross the finish line or maybe get out of the water, get on your bike. And it's very like impersonal because you're like on the road the whole time in a body of water. So having people like look at you and like, you feel like the pressure, the judgment, it was different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but
There's
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, a lot of things with competing that are just so different mentally from being in the gym, the people watching, the person, the just like I hear the words in my head of the referee doing that fight, and there's just this feeling you get in your stomach when they say that. It's like, okay, now or never.
yeah, yeah. And it's like you have to make the mind body connection. You have to be a good listener. You have to be strategic. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I competed. Like I said, I did everything I could during Blue Belt. I was like going all over Atlanta, Colorado. I lived in Michigan, so like the tri-state area, Ohio, Indiana. I was just like
Yeah,
competing, competing, competing because I really I wanted to be the best, and
yeah,
it was because I'm a competitive person and I want to be good at everything I do. So I just had that drive, and yeah, it was good, but it definitely hurt my heart a lot because I would always have this like weird thing where I lost in finals a lot, and it wasn't like due to my physical capability. It was due to me like having I don't know, just like that mental block of not being able to win for some reason. So that
yeah,
like played with me a lot, honestly.
yeah. I have a similar mental block, and I always feel like my second fight is my better fight. Like the first one
Yeah.
is my warm up, so like single elimination is not great for me because I'm out pretty
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's weird how that happens. Like sometimes it's just like you just talk yourself into losing before the match even starts, and a lot of mine's honestly in final were due to gaining too much weight in between tournaments and cutting too much weight too quick
Mhm.
and just being depleted.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Definitely. There's the I've never cut. I've had teammates who have cut that are women, and it's a trade off in terms of you cut down to the lower weight class, you're maybe
yeah,
with either the same size as you or maybe physically smaller than you, but you're depleted. But if you fight your walking weight, sometimes it's frustrating fighting your walking weight when you're in a division with people who cut down to your weight class and then they're physically larger than you even though they're competing in the same weight class. And yeah, it's
yeah.
a
It is, and like I'm short. I'm 5'2", so it's like I would weigh in the featherweight division a lot, but like I would have girls cutting from middle to get to featherweight, and they'd be like, "What are you even doing?" I remember this girl in Colorado. I competed against her in finals, and I lost. And she was
yeah.
huge, and she's like on the podium. She's just like looking down at me, like, "What are you even doing in this division?" And I was like, "I didn't want to cut any weight. I got lazy." And she's like, "You're too small for this." Because she like threw me around. Like the strength difference
Yeah.
was crazy. And the size. She was like 5'8". I was like, how did you make this weight? But she
I
did.
mean, I'm surprised she can, like, I'm a middleweight and I'm 5'4". Um, and
Yeah.
uh, there's like my first IBJJF competition. I remember the girl I was going to fight. I see her get there and they, are pulling us out of the bullpen. And I just look at her. I'm like, we're the same size. That was like our first impression of each other was, thank God. Thank God.
Yeah, right?
Cut down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's nice to compete against somebody your actual size.
Yeah.
The feeling is more fair, but like, yeah,
Hmm.
and I was always mo stronger than most of the people
Yeah.
in light feather, so that's another reason I liked it. But there were a few girls that were stronger than me, and I'm like, oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it also just feels safer, especially when you're
Yeah,
in a scenario. So people are going as hard as they can. They're not in that class setting.
yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So that's why I wouldn't do absolute a lot because I mean, like as a light feather, like no.
Yeah.
I don't want to go against like an ultra heavy. I mean, I've done absolute a couple times, but it was not a great experience. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if because I haven't competed at blue belt yet, so I haven't even had an opportunity to do absolute. I don't know if I would. I think I would sign up and look at, yeah, and if it's an ultra heavy girl, just, I'm good. I'm not gonna do that. You can have your bye.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like what are you trying to do, that day and just keep yourself safe, especially after
Yeah,
my whole neck thing. I look at it differently
yeah,
now.
yeah, and I think that's a good opportunity to talk about how you did get hurt and how you hurt your neck, because I think it says a lot about what we can, how we can improve and make jujitsu safer.
Yeah, yeah. Let me think. I can't remember what year it was. I was actually still a blue belt. So like I said, I switched when I was in Arizona, I switched to just MMA training. So I joined like a fight team, and we were expected to be there 5 days a week, an hour and a half a day. That was mandatory practice. And if you miss practice, like you're off the team because it was like, professional fighters and stuff and people, the amateurs who aspired to be pro or whatever. So they were taking it seriously. So I had to kind of like leave jujitsu training specifically behind or do it in my spare time, which you're pretty tired after, an hour and a half of MMA practice a day because it's wrestling heavy and we all know how exhausting wrestling is and conditioning and so I was that's another reason I was a blue belt for a long time because obviously a lot of people who train or fight MMA, they, they're in no gi all the time. They kind of forget the gi and they get kind of left behind. So I
Yeah.
was towards like the end of my blue belt dumb and I went to a competition only open mat at a local gym and I was training and doing rounds with a bunch of people and a guy asked me to train and I was already pretty tired and I didn't want to train with him. I remember having that feeling. And he was a brown belt at the time and he Darce choked me so hard that it popped my neck 3 times. Um, and my whole left arm like went completely numb and it just sent like tingling and numbness down into like my first finger and my thumb. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking like, oh God, like I've had my neck, obviously we've all had our neck popped and cracked and everything.
Yeah.
Like we're always rolling around upside down basically. So it's normal, but this was like different. Like I felt immediately things go dead. And I was like, oh, that's not good. And I got up
Yeah.
and I remember leaving and the next day, actually, I was supposed to go have a sparring session with one of my teammates because she was a really good boxer and she was getting a sparring session set up with herself and a couple of girls from a boxing gym. And I remember being so excited about it because I was loving learning to box. And I was like, yeah, I get to go spar because like sparring's the most fun thing, with
Yeah.
MMA and everything too, just like jujitsu. And I remember I woke up the next day and you know how like you kind of like get whiplash in your neck and it gets kind of stiff and you can't move it.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Like you have a kink right in your neck,
yeah,
and I felt that start, and I was like, ooh, but mine got really bad. And I remember telling her, I was like, hey, I can't make it to sparring today, I'm really sorry, like I messed up my neck. And then over the next couple days, like it was the most excruciating pain like I've ever felt. um it felt like my left shoulder was being like pulled out of socket, like literally I couldn't like do anything with my left arm. I always had to have it like this. Like this felt better too for some reason. But I didn't have good health insurance at the time, and I didn't want to accept that like my neck could be seriously hurt because I still really wanted to fight. Um, so I just kind of like toughed it out. And it was COVID, right? So like we were kind of in this weird time where like you shouldn't go to the hospital unless you were dying,
yeah.
or felt like you had really bad COVID. And so I just kind of like toughed it out, but I sat in like the worst pain of my life for like a week. And I had to get like a series of cortisone shots. Like I couldn't work, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't bathe, I couldn't get dressed. And I was like, oh, something is seriously wrong. But I waited about 5 or 6 months, and it was okay because the gym was pretty much shut down, open, shut because of COVID. So
Hmm.
everybody else was like losing time too, and I was losing time at the same time. But um, I tried to resume training about 5 or 6 months after that, and I was able to for a little bit. But I always had that like soreness in my neck, and then a couple months after that, I started to lose complete function of my left arm, and I
Oh,
was like not able to grab things. I was dropping things. Like, you know how you go like in the grocery store and you like grab something. I was like massacring things at the store and in my house, breaking coffee cups, and I became very frustrated.
yeah.
And also some weird things like, and this is like, if anybody has like a neck injury or like a spinal injury, like it does weird stuff to you. It's not just like, oh, I'm in pain. Like my equilibrium was off. Um, I had a problem with like proprioception when I was training. So sometimes when I was still training after my injury and I do a big inverted game, like I'm a really big guard player.
Mm.
But sometimes I would like invert and I would like roll under people, bolo, whatever. And I would like lose my place in space. Like I didn't know if I was up or down.
You got the
And
twist.
I'm like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got the twisties.
Yeah.
I got the twisties in jujitsu, and I remember sitting like against the wall after rolling, and I would have to like orient myself before I started the drive home because I have this weird dizziness and proprioception, and also another weird thing is I was completely fatigued all the time. And the neurosurgeon was like, "Of course you're fatigued because you have this huge herniation and your body's constantly sending things there to try to heal it, and it's just not healing. So it's kind of like a frivolous pursuit of like negative feedback loop." Um, so just weird things like that. Sometimes I'd see like spots of light and like headaches, chronic headaches, uh, inability to sleep because when your neck is messed up, it's like you're not going to sleep well. And then I had like a really, really weird thing where like right here would itch like crazy. Like, I mean, I was like scratching, scratching, scratching.
Oh,
And obviously it was always numb, always tingling or itching. It was
yeah.
always one of the three things. So I'm like, finally was like, okay, I got to go to the doctor. I got better health insurance. They did an MRI. The neurosurgeon just like looked at my MRI. He's like, you need surgery. He's like, and it was a year and a half at that time that I had put it off.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually had two MMA fights that were scheduled, and that was maybe like 4 months before I got the MRI, and they both canceled because amateur MMA fights get canceled a lot, and it was like a weird time. It was still COVIDy, COVIDy, and both of my fights fell through, and I was really mad because I trained really hard for them. I went through like a whole camp a couple times, and looking back, I was like, I'm amazed that I could do that with a neck that was that messed up. But
Ah.
yeah, yeah, eventually my body was just like, nope, you're not going to do this anymore. And I had surgery in March of 2022. I had a cervical disc fusion. So they went in through the front of my neck and they moved everything to the side. They went in there and they cut out my disc because it was not able to be reabsorbed by my body, and they put a metal um, disc in there, and then they put like a plate and like screws, like 4 screws to kind of like keep everything fused together, and
Yeah.
that's all she wrote.
Yeah. No, it's, I think, the because it's your nervous system, like, obviously you can say in hindsight, like, oh, your hand was itching, like, and you were like, it's the nerves that are affected, and it's,
Yeah.
um, do you, how do you think, knowing what you know now, what do you think you would have done differently, or would you have done anything differently?
Lots of things, lots of things. I would only train with people who that I knew well. Like I wouldn't do the like competition training at different gyms.
Yeah,
Um, and it's because I'm so small. Like maybe if I were bigger, maybe if I was like, I don't know, like a 5'9", 5'10" woman who was like had some weight on me, but like I'm small. At the time I was like 5'2", 115, 120. So I was very tiny. And looking back, I'm like, you have a certain set of teammates who know their strength against yours, especially males.
yeah,
Um, and I would have stuck with more trusted training partners. I wouldn't have felt the need to go test myself with so many different people. Um, I would have trained with people mostly around my size. I know sometimes it's inevitable, you have to train with bigger people, but I would
mhm,
have just sat out rounds if that were the case. I would have definitely like not been so prideful, because there were a lot of times where I was like getting ready to compete and I maybe got caught in a submission or something, and I was trying to get out, because I wanted to win. And
yeah,
I mean, and we all do this. Like we learn, we get our elbows snapped, we, get our necks cranked, we get our knees hyperextended, all the things. And it's just like looking back, that's so much unnecessary wear and tear on your body.
yeah,
Um, yeah. So yeah, definitely a couple, couple different things I would have done. Yeah.
yeah. No, definitely, especially if somebody has the submission or is about to get it, there's no shame, especially in practice and tapping, and then exploring how to avoid letting them get the position the next time. But
Yep.
sometimes, especially, my pride will get the best of me sometimes, where I'm like, I want to feel today like I'm actually, especially when you're the only woman in the class. I want to feel like I'm at least at some point in this round being offensive, and then you get caught and you don't
Yeah.
want to find your way out. But you
Yep.
know it's long,
Exactly.
it's the long, it's being able to stay in. And I remember you mentioned at the beginning, when you started training, you had been injured and were coming back from an injury from triathlons. And before I trained jujitsu, I broke 2 bones in like a 2-year period. And when you're an active person,
Oh.
it's really frustrating to not be able to be active. It
Yep.
So maybe to have that foresight in our heads of, you know, okay, this person is going to get this tap right here, but it means that I'll be able to train tomorrow if I tap.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. And like, you know, it's one thing to have like an ankle surgery or a knee surgery, but like neurosurgery is like, it's a big event. I mean, even the
Yeah,
pre-surgery like things that I did, I was like, whoa, like this is serious. Like, because obviously I went to a neurosurgeon. I didn't want like just a regular what do they call them? Orthopedic surgeon doing the surgery on me, because
yeah,
I just wanted somebody who specialized in the nervous system to operate on me. So that was one consideration. And then they do all these tests. They do like EKGs, and they really get you like prepped like a lot more than regular surgery. And they have like a nerve conduction person in addition to the regular surgeon when they're operating on you, because like if they touch something wrong or move something wrong, it's going to short circuit, like it's your motherboard,
Yeah.
So you're like, you have the potential to really just have failures all over. So you have to monitor that. And the heel, it's so crazy. Like you don't know how much your neck, like, first of all, your head is really heavy. And
Hmm.
I learned that too. Our head is like really heavy, and just the amount of times we just turn our neck in a day. I mean, like, I couldn't do things like I couldn't drive for 8 weeks. I couldn't lift over 10 pounds for 3 months, because my vertebrae had to fuse together. I could barely, like, clean my house. I had my dog at the time, and I lived in an apartment, so I couldn't walk him at all for, like, same thing, 3 months, because I couldn't have the force of him pulling me.
Yeah.
Um, and my throat was really messed up too. And uh, I think they call it like dysphagia, where like you have a sensation of something being in your throat when it's not. Um, so they move your windpipe and your esophagus to the side when they have this surgery for a long period of time, and it makes you feel like you have strep throat for a couple days after. My voice was really raspy, and my job is to run meetings a lot and talk a lot during the day, so
Yeah.
I would find myself being like breathless for like months after the surgery when I was talking, just like really weird things that like you don't consider with other surgeries that you have to deal with, you know, with a neurosurgery. And then
Yeah.
if the success rate is good, because like my surgeon was like, you can never train again. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna train again. And I did everything. I did the therapy and I did the rehab and I waited and I was careful when I went back to train. And when I went back to train, it was still not 100%, obviously. And I still felt like I was having the whiplash when I went to bed. So I'm like, is it worth feeling like I have whiplash, like mild whiplash every day?
Yeah.
Um, and then the reason that I stopped though is because I had some recurring symptoms of numbness and tingling in my fingers. And I was like, I hope I didn't mess up my surgery, which I mean, I probably didn't, because once you get fused, you're solid. But
Yeah.
it's the discs like above and below the fusion. They take like way more force because now you're missing space. You're missing a point of flexibility. So now your point of torsion is gone, and you're putting a lot of pressure on those discs above and below. And commonly, people need the surgery again and again. It's called adjacent disc disease, where those vertebrae wear out like at a really, really rapid rate. So um, I was like, I hope that's not happening to me, because like when I went in to have the surgery, they're like, you're like the youngest person here we've seen in months. I'm like, thanks. Because it's
Yeah.
like older people, like people in their like 60s and stuff, like there's almost like a good chance you have a bad disc or two or three. But like
Yeah.
people our age, they're like, what happened?
What did you
And
do?
you're like, yeah, what did you do? So I kind of saw that and I was like, oh God. And there's also another surgery now. There's an artificial disc versus a fusion. And I actually met a girl um, online because I was, all over Reddit, as we are.
Yes.
As we are, that's why I'm here. And I
Yeah.
was in like the spinal fusion forum, and I like met her too. And she's like, I do jujitsu, but she got an artificial disc, and
Mhm.
her recovery seems to be like a lot better than mine. But my surgeon told me, like, with your age, how young you are, I would just get the fusion because it's more permanent. And
Yeah.
also, he told me something terrifying. He's like, the artificial disc there is a slight chance that it could like come out. And I'm like, if you're training doing those types of things, like
Yeah.
getting chokes and stuff. And I was like, okay, so like if it came out, like would I just be dead? Like on the mat?
Yeah. What happens? The
Oh, like he never like really said, but I was like, okay, fine. I'll just get the fusion. And there's been other people too, like on my fight team, like I trained with MMA Labs. So they had a bunch of like big names out, there. They had like Benson Henderson, and like they have Mario Bautista and like Tanquinho. I don't know if you know him. he has soul fighters out in Arizona and stuff. But Tanquinho, actually had a double fusion too. So I knew his wife and I trained with her, and I was talking to her like, hey, like, how's his recovery? Well, his is good because number one, he's a man and he has a lot more like musculature around his neck. Like our necks are just built differently than men's too.
Yeah.
And that's another consideration. And I didn't know this because I looked at my neck and I'm like, I do have like a skinny long neck, but like literally our necks are longer and skinnier than men's. And it's just like how we're built.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, anytime, like, my advice would be to anybody, especially females, is like when you're drilling chokes, like don't let it go all the way. Like your partner should not be like ripping this thing, holding it, because like even that little split second that maybe they like lost control, they did it too hard, like there's serious consequences that can happen with your neck. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's really scary.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think there's definitely lessons both for the person being choked in terms of partner selection, not being afraid to say no to roles if you get that bad feeling about somebody, like, I don't know about them, and then tapping, but then also as the person applying chokes, apply them slow. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
focus on getting the technique and the placement, but not necessarily like actually ripping the choke.
Yeah, because like what we do is like very dangerous. And I think people forget that because we're always in, a somewhat controlled environment. But like when you're not, it's very, very dangerous. So that's why you have to have good training partners and you have to have good self-preservation practices. Like you can't just go in there as like me, like a little female thinking that I'm gonna like destroy everybody
Yeah,
because like sometimes you're going to meet an ego that is stronger and bigger just naturally, and then you could get really hurt. So you have to be wise, and take care of your training partners because you can really hurt somebody.
yeah. And I
So
think
yeah.
too, I don't think they realize the strength disparity because
Yeah.
even when there is a difference. There's a difference in our musculature. There's a difference in how we're built and how we move, and go through puberty and the testosterone surge they get.
Oh
It
yeah,
does,
exactly.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And that surge is like, because I think I was talking to you earlier about one of my best training partners, or a few of them were the teenage boys,
Oh
but like
yeah,
the younger ones, because they were like my size, getting bigger than me already, but like
yeah,
you could feel like even in like 6 months, you could feel those kids like strength go from like maybe they were a little stronger than me to like, and I'm like, okay, I can't train with you anymore.
yeah,
Because then they're used to like training violently with me because we could, but
yeah.
now we can't because you're,
Now it
you
changes.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yep, I've felt that as well, and they're also like, one of them. He unfortunately his dad got stationed elsewhere, so he left our gym. But I remember one time we were rolling, and he had my arm, and like he didn't know how to do the Kimura, and he had it. And when we finished the roll, I said to him, "You had a Kimura there, and I'm going to teach it to you, but you have to promise me you're not going to rip it because
Ooh, yeah,
you are very strong. So I will teach you the Kimura,
yeah,
but you can really hurt someone. So here's how you have to
yes.
fight."
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's because that's like any 2-on-1 grip is, oh gosh, it's just like, ugh.
Yeah,
And the
like they
shoulder just makes me, oh.
well, like not know what to do with my arm when he had it. He was just like doing this, and I'm like
Yeah,
watching it
right?
at that point too, and that's the part of it. You're just watching it happen. You're like, okay, how do I? It's not even at that point. How do I get this kid in a position and submit him? It's just how do I control this kid so he doesn't hurt me without. And
Yeah.
sometimes they know it. So there's partners that are shitheads, but sometimes they don't even
Hmm.
know.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why like sometimes you start training with somebody and you feel like that force and you're like, "Oh God."
Yeah,
Oh God, I need to get on top. I need to stay on top because this is gonna be a rough one.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was funny. Last weekend, I was in a women's class, and I asked a white belt to roll, and I was like, I'm just gonna. I try not to go too hard on the white belts. One time, right before I got my blue belt, I made a friend cry, and my coach talked to me about it. It wasn't a
Oh
great moment.
no.
It was not a great moment.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
just now I'm very cautious. But I asked her, how long have you been training? And she's like, oh, off and on. But I used to wrestle, and I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah. Those words.
So
Yeah.
guard, and I'm not a guard puller, and I just spent the round just trying not to get hurt because she was bigger than me. But we
Yeah.
do sometimes, and sometimes it's not just the guy. Or
Yeah, no, exactly. And I used to, when I was a blue belt in Detroit, one of my main training partners was a UFC fighter, and she was a little bigger than me. But she fought at straw weight, so she fought at 115, but she walked around in the 140s, one high 130s, 140s, and at the
oh
time I
wow,
was like 120. Yeah, they cut a lot. Those girls they cut a lot to get to straw weight. But same thing. She was a wrestler. She was very violent when she first got to the gym, but she made me have a really good guard. Like over time we like went like this with each other, which was really cool, but she could
yeah,
be a very violent role sometimes, but luckily she was close enough to my size where it didn't ever really like seriously hurt me. And I would tap, if I felt something crazy going to happen, I would tap most of the
yeah,
time. So, yeah. Yeah, but you got to be careful and you have to not be afraid. And this is like something I think that like especially as women we feel guilty of because we're caring and we don't want to like offend people a lot of the time. We don't say no to people because we don't want to like create whatever an uncomfortable environment or like whatever it is. Like we don't know how to say no sometimes. So with me, when I started after my neck surgery, I just tell people like people would come up to me and they'd be like a huge white belt guy and I'd be like, I'm not training with you. And it was just like that. I was like, I'm not training with you. I had neck
yeah,
surgery. Like, sorry, you're too big for me. And I'll tell people that now. I'm like, you're too big for me. Like I'm sorry, you're a white belt. Like I've had a major neck surgery or I've even done it like, I mean, it's not just specific to white belts though. Like one of my gyms, I trained with this brown belt guy again. It was a different one, but he like thrashed me. Good, that's what they should do. They shouldn't be demolishing us, but yeah.
mm. Yeah. I think there's a balance there, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, like as the partner who's trying to not demolish and trying to let someone work while also get their own work in, I think it takes time to learn how to do that. And I think sometimes
Yeah.
communication, like we don't always communicate what we want out of a round. And I think that could help a lot to just be like,
Yeah.
hey, I really want to work on technique. Can we, not a full flow roll, but can we really focus on angles and can you give me like this level of resistance?
Exactly. Yep. So that's why you got to be vocal and like not be afraid to um if somebody's going like way too hard and you feel like unsafe, just stop the roll. Like it's not the end of the world. Just get up and go because like
Oh,
you don't want to end up having a surgery and being out for 6 months and it's not
yeah,
fun.
yeah. And I, I am not afraid to stop rolls, but it also helps that the guys that I've stopped rolls with that were being unsafe, I'd been in my gym, for at least a year, and I knew my coaches knew me, and I knew my teammates, and this was a new
Yeah.
person and trying to show off is, whatever.
Ooh, yeah,
And so I was in the position where I felt like I had the power to stop a roll and say no.
exactly.
That's, I think, something maybe for coaches and gym owners to think of when they have someone newer, letting them know that it's an environment where they should feel safe to decline a roll or stop a roll if they're afraid of getting hurt.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's one of the scariest scenarios too, is like, and that's how the one girl who I was talking about who had the other artificial disc, she was training with somebody brand new. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my God. And he was a lot bigger than her and he just like slammed her on her head. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my. Hers was an emergency surgery too. Because she's
Oh my
tiny
God.
like me. Yeah,
Yeah.
she like lost instantly complete control and was in tremendous pain. She had to go to the ER and have it done. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's like the tips for like people who are acting in good faith of like just don't crank your submissions and realize how strong you are. And then there's like the people that think it's okay to slam someone on their head, and I'm like, what do you do?
Like it's WWE, and at the end I was like, I'm not training with you again.
Yeah.
Now I don't care because like I have a different outlook and it's like if it's affecting how I sleep at night and how I live the quality of my life, I'm definitely not afraid to say no.
Yeah.
So it's better, honestly, in my opinion, to sit out an extra round or two. And I've had plenty of circumstances in gyms where sometimes it's just big guys and I can only train with one or two people and I have to sit out round after round, and that's fine. Like I think that if you're if it's a matter of keeping yourself safe versus training with everybody every round, you should just sit out, train with people who are going to keep you safe, and you're gonna have more benefit from training with fewer partners with good quality than just training, oh bless you, training with everybody who's, here and here because you just want to get rounds in, honestly.
Yeah.
That's what I
No,
think.
I agree. Because what are you getting out of a role where that person is just thrashing you and not giving you like the opportunity, like that whole thing of like we both get a productive role? If someone's just thrashing you for their ego, how is that? You're putting yourself in danger and you're not really getting anything out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then sometimes if you do train with somebody who's like way bigger than you and they're like taking it super easy on you, we get a false sense of a technique working and we
Yeah.
get a false sense of security. Like I've, trained with women who
Mm-hmm.
I will, you know, submit repeatedly. And then they'll go train with a guy who I train with. And the guy obviously would train harder with me because at the time I was a higher belt, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the girls would come back to me and be like, I just beat him up. And I'm like, you didn't. You know what I mean? Like, let me explain something to you. I know it's empowering and I know, but you have to
Yeah.
be realistic with yourself too, because like, and sometimes, yeah, you can thrash like a smaller guy, even a guy who's a higher belt than you if you get lucky, even if, especially if you're bigger. Sometimes it does happen and that's the truth, but like, you have to be real with yourself, like, have a good sense of like reality. And that's one thing also that I learned with training MMA is like, there were guys that were, because like you start getting punched in the face, obviously. And
Mm-hmm.
there were guys who would take it easy on you, and there were guys who would put a little more heat on the punches.
Yeah.
So the strength differential when you're getting hit is very noticeable. It's like, whoa, like that they're really, and they're still pulling their punches when you get like rocked. So you're like, oh, that's actually when I started to develop way more like caution when training with guys is after I started MMA because I was like, oh, you guys are a lot stronger than us. You're just letting us work, which is need that
Yeah.
neck.
Yeah. Like you're
Yeah.
trying to make a highlight roll in the gym. Like
Yeah.
I don't know what you tell
No.
that.
Probably just leave.
Yeah.
Like, maybe just this isn't for you.
Yeah, I think sometimes it is on the instructors. If someone, I mean, look,
Yeah.
I had my instructor tell me, "Hey, you can't crank submissions. You made your friend cry today," and I felt really ashamed.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it had like so some people are coming from a good place and they just need some guidance.
Yeah.
maybe need a talking
True.
to. If they don't change, then this is not for them and they need to leave.
Yeah. Yeah, like pile driving someone. It's like crazy. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. And I asked her, I'm like, why would you train with that guy? She's like, oh, I just wanted to prove myself. She had that false sense of security thing. And
Yeah.
sometimes, I mean, look, I've been worked by women too, equally. Like I told you, my old instructor, when I was a blue belt, she's a black belt world champion, and she's my weight, little bit bigger, and she would throw me around like one of the guys, easily. So
Yeah.
it's not just, it's like the 1%, she's like the 1%, but it's not gender specific.
Yeah.
But it's just like if you have, like, let's say you're training with somebody and they're significantly bigger than you and you like to play guard and they fall on you, that's like a consideration too. Like sometimes people just make mistakes, and then, like, do I want to be underneath a 200-pound person or a 300-pound person? That's a lot of weight on me. So I always
Yeah.
like think like that. Like, I don't want to, I don't want to
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. You're like sometimes like sometimes it's just an accident. It is a dangerous sport and accidents do happen.
Yeah.
Like the way to alleviate that is to ask, like, can we do a situational round? Can I work on this guard pass I've been working on? Like, so,
Yeah.
so their 200 pounds is not on you.
Yeah, exactly. You have to have like a strategy with certain people, and like there's certain people in the gym that if you train with and you have like a bad round, like, and this was really good because like eventually I did have a couple females at my old gym in Detroit, and I would be kind of like the litmus test for like if the guys were safe or not, just because I had trained longer than the other girls usually. So
Yeah.
I would be like this after a round, and we'd like watch each other train, and we'd be like, ooh, that's not going well, or they would see it happening, so I'd be like, no, just don't.
It's
So we
funny.
watched out for each other a lot.
Yeah. It's funny. We do the same thing, or we'll pull each other aside, and then luckily, we have 3 male coaches in my gym, and I've recently made the joke, 2 of them are mom and dad, and the third is our wacky uncle. Like, that's the relationship I have with them. So, like, I feel like I can also, like, do that with them. Like, be like, don't let him roll with the girls. And they will
Yeah,
take it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's great. Yeah, it's great to have coaches like that, because then, especially, like, I would have a coach too who would not allow the females to choose their partners. He would choose their partners for them. So
Yeah.
I never had to worry about it with that. He was like, you go with her, you go with her. And it was like that every single day. So
Yeah.
I was like, nice. Yeah.
That's definitely something, especially when a girl is newer, because you have that break and everyone pair up, and it's always the newer people that are looking around and don't know who to pair with and end up getting the last person picked. And
Yeah.
getting the last person picked sometimes is that, like, person that goes a little too hard because no one else wants to train with them. So that's, I think, where coaches or um, other people in the gym, no one was doing it for me when I was a white belt, because honestly, like, all the other girls in the class were also white belts, but no one was doing, go with this guy, or, hey, can you train with her? Coach was,
Yeah.
but I think having that mindset too of like, oh, there's a new girl here, go roll with her, make sure she's safe, and then ask one of the guys or one of the other girls in the class who will keep them safe to roll with them next.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you have to take care of people, and I know some people get the complaint like, "Oh, I don't want to interrupt my training, and I'm a female, so I don't always want to be stuck with other females." And that's fine, but you don't have to be. You just
Yeah.
have to make sure that, like, you're giving somebody new guidance so they don't get seriously hurt, and it doesn't take that long out of your session. And
Yeah.
it's rare, honestly, that we're all training for world championship. So like your time is you're gonna get your training in, regardless
Yeah.
of if you take 5 minutes to train with this person or train with that person, so sometimes people forget that.
Yeah. The other thing is like I want like female training partners that I can get good training in with. Well, how do I do that? I need to make sure that they come back and make sure that they get better. So that's
Yeah,
my
exactly. Yeah, and like take the time, like let's say, because when I was training in Michigan, I was, like I said, I was the one who had trained a lot longer. So we had a lot of new girls come in, and I would just be like, hey, can I drill this move with you? Can we just do drilling today? And it would help them learn the move,
Mhm.
because we would do it over and over and over, and it would help me perfect the move because somebody was actually my size, and I'd be like, give me resistance, so you can be smart about your training, even if
Yeah.
you're, an upper belt, you can still benefit. You just have to
Yeah.
be strategic. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I totally agree with that. So final question. What advice would you give somebody on day one going into a class?
Um, I would say, come back because your first day is like, it's just like so overwhelming, and it's just the very, very tip of everything. You need like, I would say you need like 4 classes
Mhm.
before you can like decide if you hate this or you love this.
Mhm.
And if you decide if you hate it, that's fine. You've tried, but like you can't just like decide in 1 hour, because that's not enough. So like come back a couple times, decide if it's for you or if it's not for you. Yeah, because it's just like the first day is just like information overload. You're like, what is this weird thing I'm doing? How do I tie my belt?
Mhm.
What do I do when I get on and off the mat? So it's like you're like a complete like, you know, you're kind of like in shock
Yeah.
the first day. So yeah, and I've actually been to a couple gyms, like visited or whatever,
Mhm.
or knew people there who their policy for people is they don't just get one drop in. Their drop in is like a session of 3 or 4
Yeah.
classes. And the first session is not just you go do a class, it's you do a 30-minute one-on-one. And that's what we used to do at my gym actually in Detroit.
Mhm.
We would do like an intro session where you got kind of an intro to what's going to go on when you go to class. And I
Mhm.
thought that was really cool because people would be a lot less intimidated once they actually did the class. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
No,
that would be what I would tell people for sure.
yeah. Well, Shelby, thank you so much for your time. And I think there's a lot of good takeaways with regards to safety, both as keeping yourself safe and your partner safe. And, keep me posted about, as you figure out, what your future do. I'd love to hear about it, and then maybe, we could come on again sometime. Like, I know you're still navigating that. We can talk about it, and you can share any updates as you work through that. But thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. You too. Keep me posted on your progress and everything too.
All right, will do. All
All
right,
right. Thank you.
you take care.
I hope you all enjoyed listening to Shelby's story. Listening back to it, I wrote down some lessons learned from our discussion, which include trust your gut. If you're feeling tired, take a rest round. If someone asks you to roll and you have a bad feeling about them, it's okay to say no. Also, listen to your body. If you need a rest day, take a rest day. If something doesn't feel right, go to the doctor and take the time to let things heal. This is a sport that it takes 10 years to get to black belt on average. It's one that we all hope to be in long term. So remember that the next time something doesn't feel right and take care of yourselves. Until then, later, babes. Bye.